Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. I am Jessica Butterfield with the National Safety Council. Today is our first 2023 gathering of the Pediatric Vehicular Academic Stakeholders Work Group. Thank you so much for joining us. We do have a few presenters today. We have Null and Kristin Kingsley, which I'll do a little further introduction. I think they may have been known to speak in these meetings before. I thank them very much for sharing some information with us today. Our Pediatric Vehicular Heatstroke Academic Stakeholders Work Group are viewed as gathering the industry leaders and advocacy members in pediatric vehicular heat stroke, and we're working together to advance pediatric vehicular heat stroke strategies to reduce those cases to zero. PVH is the leading cause of death for children. I always skip this. Sorry, look at my notes. Death for children that are in vehicles not crash related. And we're all here gathered together to try to bring those numbers down. And we thank you very much for being here today. And today is January 5th, 2023. We were talking earlier, how many of you have put 22 on something? It just happens. It's the way the brain works, which we've talked quite a bit about in this group. It's nothing too interesting, really, because it's just how the brain works. Again, my name is Jessica Butterfield, and I'm with National Safety Council. I work on pediatric vehicular heat stroke programming, along with some other groups that we work on at NSC, and we're going to spend some time together to keep that collaboration in mind and keep getting to know each other. And we have a few members today, and I took a look at the group that was registered, and we do have a few people with last names U to Z, which is unlike me. When your last name starts with a B, you always have to go first. So we'll start off with some introductions, because I guarantee you after this meeting, I always get the flurry of emails that say, hey, can you connect me with this person and that person? So I see you guys talking to each other, and I see you guys working together and collaborating. We'll talk a little bit more about that, of how to get that information out to you. And we do have a presentation from Null, who is with San Jose State University and is a certified meteorologist. And I work with him with the noheatstroke.org, a website I'm sure you're all familiar with. And then we have Kristin Kingsley today, who is going to talk about original equipment manufacturers' voluntary commitment report. She has a little bit of an update for us. And then we're going to do our regular breakout sessions, where we're going to get into policy, communication, research, and technology, and get into those small groups so we can continue talking and trying to advance those, strategize, and those countermeasures that are trying to reduce those numbers to zero. And we have a few closing announcements as well, and gather all together and see what we learned. So if we have anyone who wants to speak up first, the thought is to introduce yourself if your last name is U through Z, and just spend about 30 seconds to a minute to tell us a little bit about your role, your background, your activities, and your countermeasure interests. We'll see if I can't see everyone who is here. If we don't have anyone with the U to Z, if we have any new members joining, I saw a few people registered that have not joined us before. So we'd like to get to know you too. And of course, this continues in the breakout sessions as well. So anyone with the U to Z would like to pop up first, or anyone new to the group? Don't all go at once. If we don't have anyone, we can move right along. Again, it's nobody new, nobody U through Z. That is okay. This is our first of 23, but we have been meeting regularly on a quarterly basis. So maybe we're all getting to know each other, and we'll circle back next month or next quarter and continue these introductions. And I know they continue in the breakout sessions as well. Sometimes the conversation flows a little bit more in those. So I'm not going to hold us up anymore, because we have a lot of content here. So I'm going to move right along and introduce just a little snapshot before Jan starts. When we look at 23, and this was pulled from noheatstroke.org, it's interesting to note and I'm sure Jan will go into more detail, that this is the third year in a row where the cases are below the national average. And Jan will talk a little bit more of that. But at the same time, in 22, we have increased from the previous 2 years, 2020 and 21. So we're below the national average, but we did see an increase over the past 2 years prior. And just wanted to show a really quick snapshot of that and then toss it to Jan. And I do have your slides ready, Jan. So if you just would like to tell me to advance, and I will do the work from here.
Sure.
So I'm going to toss it to you.
Yep, sure. Let's just go to the intro slide. I think you've already kind of covered this. So next. So during the past 12 months, the numbers are down, as Jessica said, from the national average, which was 38. With the last 3 lower years, that number is now 37 per year. If we get any more this year, if we get to 31 or more this year, it's going to bump the average back up to 38. So, and you can sort of see, you can see the concentration in the Southeast, kind of typical. Not a lot of other cases though in the West. Sort of a slow year in the West. Though looking at these numbers so far, there are still 5 other cases that I'm tracking that are that could possibly end up being in the database. I'm looking for confirmation for some additional information on those. So sadly, you have to kind of be able to stay tuned for that. Hopefully, they're not going to go in there, but I wouldn't be surprised if at least we see a couple more added to these numbers. Next. So as Jessica said, we've had the last 3 years sort of our pandemic years, and I think that the sort of the bump back up this year from the 25 and 23 that were in 2020 and 2021, can probably be sort of, in some areas moving back to more normal activities and starting to see people, people going back to work, leaving their children or taking their children to childcare and the other activities that we have historically seen. So from the number of miles traveled by people, those numbers are going up, and that sort of parallels this. Next. So this is the summary to date, with the numbers up through what I had as of 2 nights ago. And again, I always had that plus out there because there are cases that we, that go under the radar. They happen in rural areas, or they're not disclosed through the media. Some are provided confidentially to other places, but without public confirmation, I don't add them into my database. And then one more slide. So this is showing the per capita numbers, and these are probably a better metric to be able to look at, where the worst areas are, where you have because now this is skewed toward population. So even though Texas has by far the greatest total numbers, their population is such that it keeps them down sort of into one of the high middle categories, if you will. And again, you can see the concentration in the Southeast and then across the desert Southwest. So, and nationally, the average is 15.4. So you can kind of see where that, that dividing line is basically about the Mason-Dixon line, and then on across the middle part of the continent. So really, that's all I had, just a kind of a brief update of what has happened in the last year, how that has moved some of the numbers that we routinely look at, and over the next month or so, I'll be updating the sort of now the annual document that I've been doing, pediatric vehicular stroke by the numbers, and sort of breaking down a lot more categories. So watch for that in the email distribution list. If you are not on my email distribution for when incidents happen, or I do changes to noheatstroke.org, drop me a note at jan.null at sjsu.edu, jan.null at San Jose State University.edu, sjsu. So that's all I have for now. If there are no questions, I'll turn it back to Jessica, and I will see you in one of the breakout rooms.
Thank you very much, Jan. And I heard you say that the monthly or the updates with the 22 data will be available in about a month. So everyone keep a look on for that on noheatstroke.org, and then we'll have by the numbers available. And speaking of how to communicate and how to get a hold of everyone, there's something that I put in the meeting invites, the JOT form. We've had probably about a third of responses, and I'll gather that in the next week and get that out there. But I'll put the link in the chat as well. But if you go back to your meeting invite, there is a JOT form that fills out and asks you if you'd like to be part of the distribution contact list and what information you would like to share. So I will make sure to put the link there so the communication can continue beyond this group quarterly. Okay, thank you very much. If anyone has no questions, I will let Kristin take over with her OEM update on the voluntary agreement. Thank you, Jan.
Thanks so much, Jessica, and thank you for the National Safety Council for hosting this group. I think everyone can agree that it's been very valuable in having these discussions, but also in making connections for all of us so that we can continue these discussions outside of this meeting. Jessica invited me today to talk about the voluntary agreement that the OEMs put together in 2019. But what I wanted to do is just share a little bit broadly about vehicle-based countermeasures, because in this group, we do talk about all of the different potential countermeasures. So obviously the data is very important for us to figure out what is this problem that we're trying to address and to inform how we can address it and how we can make the most difference. I participate on this group as a representative of the Alliance for Automotive Innovation. My colleague Paul Scullion is also in these meetings quarterly. I think he's at CES in Las Vegas this week, so unable to join us today. But you're welcome to reach out to either of us or both of us afterwards if you have questions about anything that I'm presenting today. I just wanted to talk a little bit about the auto manufacturer's perspective on vehicle-based countermeasures for roadway safety broadly. And we do believe that Vision Zero is the goal, and it's driven by data and sound science. We also embrace the safe system approach, which is that fundamentally we know that drivers, humans, everyone in the system should be expected to make mistakes. We're human, that's what we do. And we should design systems with that in mind and ensure that those mistakes do not result in fatalities and serious injuries. And by design, I mean system design, I mean laws, I mean roadway design, vehicle design. There are so many different ways that we can make sure that human mistakes don't result in fatalities. And so when we talk about vehicle-based technologies or vehicle-based approaches to reducing roadway fatalities, and even not in roadway fatalities, such as pediatric vehicular heat stroke, we think of it as just one in a layered approach of how we can address this issue. In 2019, a part of that layered approach, I have to emphasize, definitely includes education, enforcement, even aftermarket products. So technology also, just not the original equipment. In 2019, and this is what Jessica asked me to kind of talk about today, the auto manufacturers came to a voluntary agreement. Usually new technology makes its way into the fleet by many different ways and on many different timelines. It could be through market driven, if there's a really good cost benefit. It could be through regulation. Sometimes regulation takes a really long time, and so NHTSA does a pretty good job encouraging new technology through NCAP. But then we also have this mechanism on voluntary agreements. And this is something where usually we expect that there might be a future regulation, but this may be a faster way to get new technology into the fleet. And so what the auto manufacturers agreed to was that by model year 2025, or vehicles that begin sale in September 2024, depending on the cycle by each individual manufacturer, every vehicle will have as standard equipment a rear seat reminder system. And between the agreement in 2019 and the goal of 2025, we would submit annual reporting so that folks would know where we are on that path to standard equipment. So we've had a few conversations over the last year and a half with this stakeholder group about the different kinds of technologies that are out there. I just wanted to touch on the two current approaches that most folks are familiar with. There's the door logic approach, and then there's the occupant sensing approach. Let me see if I can zoom in on this picture so folks can see it better. An example of the door logic approach is basically if somebody opens the rear door before a trip to put a child in, or to put a person or something else, at the end of that trip, they will get a reminder that says, check your rear seat. And there are pros and cons to this approach. There are pros and cons to every approach. This one really is intended to capture all possible scenarios of somebody being left in a back seat. Drawbacks are, it fails in some situations. And I think that there may be some tweaks that can fix that, but you also run the risk of desensitizing folks to getting this message pretty much every time they're in the vehicle and not taking it seriously that one time that they do need to take it very seriously. But this is a great approach. This was one of the faster ways to get some kind of technology in vehicles, and it is out there today. Another really great approach is specific to occupant sensing. And this system basically uses ultrasonic sensors to detect motion in the rear seat. And if there is motion in the rear seat when the vehicle is off, then a notification will be given to the driver through an app, and also to capture passersby attention. The horn will beep and the lights will flash, signaling that there's an occupant in this vehicle, in the rear seat of this vehicle. And so this is also out on the roads today. These two examples are, proven that they work. They're ubiquitous, in vehicles, but there's also a bunch of other research going on to try to identify other potential systems. So for example, now that driver monitoring systems are becoming more common in vehicles, right now they're used specifically for making sure the driver is still engaged while their level 2 system is active, because we don't want people to think that it's no longer their responsibility to drive. But in the future, they may be tweaked for detecting driver drowsiness or driver distraction. It's also possible that they could be used to detect motion in the rear seat when a vehicle is off. Another possibility is a breath sensor. So for years and years, there's been development of the DAD system, which is to detect alcohol, driver alcohol, but it also measures CO2 in the cabin. And so that could be eventually used to find out if there's somebody in the rear seat as the sensors improve, and as there's a way to figure out how to keep that working even when the vehicle is off. And so while we're meeting this voluntary agreement with the technology that's out there, we are continuing to improve. The first annual reporting was this past October, and this information is available on Auto Innovator's website. There are more than 150 vehicle models available now that have some kind of rear seat reminder system on them. This represents, I think, 12 OEMs. And so it's a lot. There's a lot of options for parents and caregivers when they're selecting their new vehicles. The reporting requirements ask folks to identify whether or not that vehicle model has that technology as optional or standard equipment. So that's in there. And then there's also a docket where manufacturers reported their fitment. And in each of those reports, it does tell you the percentage of the fleet that is equipped with a rear seat reminder system. So looking through briefly from what I saw, some manufacturers reported 0%. Because they're working on either equipping similar technology, which is what's already out there, or looking at other innovative technologies. But for those that do have them and reported that they do have them, I saw between about 45% and over 90% of that OEM's fleet of vehicles being equipped. So there are a lot of options out there. The next report will be next October, and I will eventually ask Jessica to share these slides with all of you, so we can provide these links that I have in these resources, but it links to the voluntary agreement, so you can see exactly what the OEMs have agreed to and by when. This first October 2022 report on the Auto Innovator site and the docket where all of the manufacturers have provided the information. And I just want to say, I didn't put them on this slide, but there are some other great resources that you can look into. Consumer Reports is also reporting on what vehicles are equipped with which kinds of systems and their evaluation of those systems. And Kids in Cars has a really neat section on their website that shows all of the different technologies, well, many of the different technologies that are under consideration and could be candidates for future countermeasures. So with that, I don't know, Jessica, if we have time for questions or if you just want to address it in the breakout session, but folks are welcome to email either me or Paul or both of us to let us know if you want to know more.
We have a few minutes, I would say about 2 minutes before the breakout session. So we do have a few questions. Let's get the first one in, and then possibly the rest can come in the breakout session. The first one was from Michelle. Do these monitoring systems capture number of times activated data that manufacturers release to the public?
Oh, so that's a really good question. They definitely, it's not part of the voluntary agreement to report on that. And I don't know if there's a mechanism in place for the OEMs to actually provide that information to the public. But I can ask the folks that do have these how they're capturing the data that they're getting. So for example, if they know whether they're getting a false positive or a false negative or a true positive or a true negative, and follow up with you on that.
Thank you.
Perfect. Thank you, Kristin. There's a few more questions and we'll see if those can get addressed in the breakout sessions. If not, when we come back together. And then as always, we can continue the conversation after. Kristin, if you don't mind, stop sharing. I have just a few to get us into where we need to be. Thank you so much for that presentation. If you look in the chat, Kristin, you'll see a lot of thank yous in there from people that are joining us.
Yeah, and I see a lot of questions that we don't have time to answer. So please reach out to me on email or something and we can chat. So thanks.
We'll fill out that jot form that will get us all in touch, making sure we have all our information too. We'll bring that up again too. But before we go into the breakout sessions, just wanted, and this might be really relevant to the policy group, stumbled upon this yesterday, a policy update from the state of New York. There was a bill, I believe it's, if I look at it, 8A381A for those of you who are good with letters and numbers, but it did not pass. It was vetoed in December of 22 by the governor. But for those of you who may not be aware or didn't know where it ended up, it was requiring the sale of car seat warning devices. So if you sold a car, if you sell child restraint systems, if you sold a car seat, it would have also required you to sell car seat warning devices. It also required education and warning messages to be displayed. It was introduced in January of 21. It did pass the Senate in New York in May of 22, but then it was vetoed by the governor in December of 22. And I think that is for this group, seeing what's out there, what is being proposed, what is being passed, what is being vetoed, and is there anything that this group can do to help in that space of getting policy out there and good recommendations for those who are looking to do something in terms of the policy for their state or their agency or their group. So I just wanted to start there, but I know we're out of time here before the breakout sessions, but wanted to drop that on you guys before you chose your sessions. And we have the three that we normally have. We have research and technology, we have communications, and we have policy. Did I say that already? No, okay. I'm going to bring those up so I can remember. You get to choose your own room that you would like to go. If it's not the one that you did before, that is fine. We're going to try to record these locally is the term that Zoom uses. If it doesn't work, we'll make sure to get the notes back to you in a reasonable amount of time. I want to thank Amy Artuso, Michelle Gaja, and Katie Mueller from NSC, who are helping facilitate these breakout rooms. So thank you for joining us today and being the facilitators for these groups. So go ahead. I'm going to go ahead and open the rooms. You get to choose your own adventure, if you will. And I will kind of bounce around. That's set up for a half an hour and will take us back to the main room after. So I hope that you're able to connect, communicate, and work together to keep this conversation going and advancing our strategy on reducing PVH cases. Thank you guys very much. See you soon. I'm staying here to make sure y'all get to where you want to go.
And Jessica, just in case you want to talk about it as the whole group, the JPMA weighed in against that New York bill, and I'd be happy to explain why when we get there. We actually encouraged the governor to veto that bill. I
have some thoughts on that. I was wondering, it was just a, hey, it's out there type of thing, but just from a really quick look at it, I'm like, I can see why this ended up where it did. But that's something to take a look at. What can be done better? What was the purpose? What were some things that could be improved on in terms of getting something that is going to have impact passed versus throwing something out there that might have been good intention, but
definitely good intention, but against instructions, which is problematic.
Exactly. That was the first thing I had. You're requiring them to sell something that a car seat manufacturer might say we can't. This isn't allowed to be used on our product, and then you're requiring them to sell it in terms of, and then you have parents buying, and then there's go to technicians who are told not to use it.
Yep.
But the lovely circle that we live in. Okay, wonderful. I'll stop talking, you're off.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you, Joe. Hi, Laura. Hi, Uwe. Are you guys choosing rooms? You guys stay with me? Uwe, what room would you like to go in, sir?
I stay where I am right now.
You don't want to go in any other room?
No.
Okay, that works for me. How about you, Laura? You good?
The reason why I want to stay is maybe I hear a little bit more about the event with the New York State building.
It was really an awareness for me that it was out there. I stumbled upon it yesterday, and, we're going to see more and more policy being introduced and good intentions, and whether it's going to have the impact that we are expecting is something different. So it was just really for the policy group to, hey, be aware of it and see if there's something that can come out of it. Let's see here.
Hi, Jessica. I apologize. I'm around. I apologize.
Get more faces. Welcome, everybody.
I'm glad you're the host with me, Uwe. I appreciate it. Gotta have someone watching the fort while you walk away. This was the first time I was able to bounce around in rooms, and appreciated the conversation that was going on. And again, thank you to the facilitators of the room that allowed me to do that. I've always been, in one and not being able to see what was going on in the others. But let me quickly share my screen here so we can do a wrap up, because I know that you are all busy people and this is part of your day. We're going to just briefly do a recap here in a second. If you have any updates, please let me know and I can distribute them to the group as a stakeholder, which we view you as being part of this group. And also, if you have something new or an update or something you'd like to present to the group, please just let me know and we can start working on the agenda for the next session. We always like to make sure that you are available, that there are free e-learnings available both in English and Spanish, and those are found on carsieteducation.org. And you can set them up for group training as well, whether they want to be done in different settings, and you can actually keep track of who they're assigned to and who completes them as well. And you could just contact training@cpsboard.org. I always like to make sure people know that they're there, they're available in 2 different languages, and make the awareness spread that they're there. I don't know if we've got, it's 2 o'clock, but Amy, do you have a 1-minute brief of a highlight of what was going on in research and technology? You definitely had the most people in your group.
Again, woohoo. So I want to thank everyone that joined that group, and special thanks to Kristin for facilitating a conversation. I'm going to make a recommendation that we have a buddy system like that moving forward, because she could facilitate the conversation and I could take notes. But I think we had a really productive conversation. Again, there was comparison or discussion about the US NCAP versus Euro NCAP and consumer reports and the possibility of harmonization, and then technology discussions about what's available and how testing is being done with live children versus the dummies that can mimic motion detection. As there was new research efforts were discussed, encouraging the rest of the group to also add some pressure. And a big shout out to SensorSafe, who, when Rihanna's baby was born, got a lot of attention for their SensorSafe technology. So I could go on because there was a lot of discussion. And as far as equity, keeping people in mind, underserved populations and mom and pop childcare providers who may not have access to all the technology, including whether it's vehicle or apps that people are using. So keeping that in mind as well. But it was a great discussion in that group. My thanks to everyone that joined.
Thank you, Amy. I popped in right when they were talking about the Rihanna, and the attention in the SensorSafe world just blew up. So I'm interested to read more about what other conversation was going on. And I love the idea of having the facilitator in the note. It's hard to do. The brain can do so much. I totally understand that. And I was wondering, Michelle, if you have 30 seconds or a minute or less to give us some highlights of what was going on in policy.
Absolutely. I would say that the 2 top lines are that car seats are designed to keep occupants safe in the event of a crash, and they were never necessarily designed to protect infants and children from this specific cause of death and injury, and that the aftermarket devices that are being added on in an attempt to do that have not been safety tested in terms of how they affect a seat in the event of a crash, and that is an ongoing concern of allies in the field and organizations that would like to push legislation for technology to detect children, but that aftermarket devices at this point are not the best option, that integrated options are. The second top line is how important it is when discussing vehicle systems that attempt to monitor either CO2 or motion in a vehicle to alert individuals that a vehicle that's turned off may have an occupant left behind, that those technologies are vehicle wide and not just isolated to back seats, in order to ensure that we really are taking, the maximum steps towards safety inside our cars.
Thank you very much, Michelle, and thank you for policy group coming together. And again, we're going to get together and take a look at the notes that came out of this and distribute them as well, taking this beyond just today and getting them out to the whole group. So thank you very much for everyone's participation. I know in communication, we had a few people and they decided they'd rather, instead of have a small communication group, join some other group. So we will see communication pop up again next time. And just to really briefly recap, these are videotaped and recorded, and they are available at cpsboard.org/heatstroke. Just look for the next steps in evidence-based practice. You can review this session and also the previous recordings as well. And let's see here. And then just to let you know, I'll be sending out an invite for the next academic stakeholders, PVH academic stakeholders, that is meeting in April. We're on a quarterly basis right now, and that will be at the same time at 2. There is my contact email. I appreciate all the people that are here today, and then especially our speakers and facilitators, Jan, Kristin, Amy, Michelle, and I can't speak her name. Katie, thank you. I'm just like blank. And I put the jot form for the contact list. There is a lot of networking, a lot of collaboration, and a lot of possibility going on in these small windows of opportunity for this group. So please, if you're willing to get on that contact list, go ahead and fill out that jot form. I'll put it together and distribute as we can. Thank you so much. Have a good week, and we will see you in April. And please reach out and we can keep this strategizing and reduction of PVH cases moving in the right direction. Thank you guys so much.
Thanks, Jess.
Thank
Bye,
you.
everybody.
Thank you, Jessica.